70-year-old man threw his 6-year-old daughter into the mountains. She was supposed to be food for the beasts, but the girl accidentally befriended a black bear. Not only was she sheltered by the bear, but she also gained a great deal of wealth. The girl's name was Martha. She lost her mother at a young age and lived with her father. But in order to relieve his loneliness, he found a stepmother for her. This made her life miserable. At only 6 years old, Masha was made to do all the housework. She had to get up at dawn to wash the clothes and feed the chickens, and clean the yard. Knowing that his father wouldn't dare offend his stepmother, he had no choice but to suffer in silence. The opposite of her is her stepmother's daughter. She's about the same age, but she has a different family status. When he was about to get up to go down to the floor, he fell into the bucket below. His wailing attracted his stepmother. The stepmother blamed Martha for the accident. Martha couldn't defend herself against her stepmother's scolding. She went into her father's arms, hoping to find some comfort. But her stepmother didn't want to let Martha off the hook. Instead, she brought a ball of twine in front of the old man. She told Masha to go into the mountains and spin it. If she couldn't finish it, she would never return home. The old man stood in the doorway, a coward, and accepted his wife's request. The next day, he drove his daughter in a horse-drawn wagon to the mountains. After a long journey of more than 40 kilometers, the carriage finally stopped in a deep forest. The father dropped off his daughter. He left in a hurry, leaving his daughter to fend for herself. But luckily there was an abandoned wooden house here. It was a temporary place for him to stay. Martha brushed the dust from every corner of the room, and made a pot of rice porridge from the grain she had gathered in the field. The smell of the rice spread throughout the room and attracted a mouse that was out looking for food. It begged Masha to give it some food. The kind Masha gave him a small plate of porridge. Then she went back to sorting out the tangled threads. But Masha's tears were brought to her eyes by life's hardships. To repay her for the porridge, the little mouse took out his handkerchief and performed an impromptu dance for Masha. This helped to bury his sorrow a little. But then, unbeknownst to him, a bear entered the house. Instinctively, Masha threw down her twine and stood up. This was the bear's home, but the bear didn't want to hurt him. He looked at the house, which had been cleaned up by Martha. He said he wanted to play a game with him. If Martha won, she would get a present. If she lost, she had to leave the house. At that moment, Masha had no choice. She had no choice but to agree to the bear's demands. The bear put a white cloth over her eyes and began to look for Masha in the house. The mouse couldn't bear to see Masha driven out of the house, so he took the bellflower and ran around the bear. The mouse was so strong that the bear couldn't catch him. The bear sat down on a stool, panting. Martha brought him the rest of the porridge. Then she sat down on the bench again to sort out the twine. The bear told him to go to bed. In the morning, he'd get a surprise. And at night, the little mouse chewed a hole in the curtain. A ray of moonlight came into the room. The mouse wrapped the moonlight around his spindle, and the bear stirs the spindle. The bright moonlight is spinning on this spindle. It's like a million stars jumping around. When the next day's sunlight filtered into the house, Masha was not only dressed in new clothes. A strand of golden thread, woven with moonlight, was laid aside. When Masha's father saw that the threads had been cleared, Masha's father decided to take Masha home. Before he left, the bear gave Masha 3 white horses and a wagon load of jewels. As a token of appreciation for cleaning the house, the sound of the carts and horses eventually reached the yard. The stepmother and her daughter saw that Martha had not only returned safely, and the wealth she had brought with her. They followed her example and went into the woods, hoping to get even more than Masha. Mother and daughter came to the bear's room, but she wasn't as humble as Martha. She kicked over all the pots in the room, and pulled out a jar of leftover gruel from the boiler. He tasted it. It's not bad. Now the little mouse came forward to ask for some, but he was refused. At that moment, Bear came into the house with the wood he had just collected. He asked the girl why she was there. The girl said she was looking for a treasure. The bear asked what he wanted. The stepmother hid behind the door and told him she wanted 3 white horses and 5 large chests of gold, silver and jade. It was easy for Bear to do what he wanted, so he said what they wanted had been left at the door, on the condition that they cleaned their house for a month. But how could the shrewd mother and daughter agree to the bear's conditions? They mounted the 3 white horses at the gate. With a cart full of jewels, they headed for home. Now the bear stood at the door and said he would make them pay. And so it was. The wagon they were driving crashed into a tree before they got halfway there. The wagon was smashed to pieces. The gold and jewels inside were reduced to wood shavings. The mother and daughter would end up trapped in the forest, never to see the light of day. This is the price of greed.